Don't drink that, it's poison. The crystal wine glass froze inches from Graham Sterling's lips. Every head in the gold-lit restaurant turned. A soaked black teenager stood in the doorway, chest heaving, rainwater pooling at his torn sneakers. Security moved fast, but the kid didn't run. His eyes locked on the glass with the cold certainty of someone who'd already calculated the outcome. "Sir, step back from the wine. Now!" The glass shattered against marble. Cameras flashed, and in that suspended moment before chaos erupted, Sterling saw something that made his blood freeze. Not fear in the boy's face, but recognition. Like looking at a ghost who knew exactly how you were supposed to die. I invite you to follow this story to the very end. Please like and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey reaches. The rain came down in sheets that Thursday night, turning the streets of Boston into rivers of neon and diesel exhaust. Darius Cole pressed himself deeper into the concrete alcove beneath the overpass, water streaming past his makeshift shelter of cardboard and plastic tarps. His notebook, the only thing that mattered anymore, stayed dry inside a triple-sealed freezer bag tucked against his chest. 17 years old, homeless for 8 months, and still running calculations in his head like his life depended on it, because once upon a time it had. "Yo, D, you got those results yet?" Marcus appeared through the rain curtain, a 40-something veteran with a limp and eyes that had seen too much. He held out a plastic water bottle like it was evidence in a trial, which, in a way, it was. Darius pulled out his testing kit, assembled from salvaged chemistry supplies, donated litmus strips, and equipment he'd quietly borrowed from a university dumpster. The kit looked like junk. It worked like precision. "Give me 3 minutes. Man, you're the only homeless kid I know running a street lab." Marcus settled onto a milk crate, watching Darius work with something close to reverence. "Where'd you learn this stuff?" "My father." The words came out flat. Darius didn't look up as he added reagents to the sample, watching the color shift. "He taught me chemistry before I could ride a bike. Said understanding molecules was like learning to read the world's secret language." Past tense? Past tense. Darius held the test strip up to his phone's flashlight. The reading made his jaw tighten. "Marcus, this water's contaminated. Lead levels 3 times the EPA limit. Don't drink it. Tell everyone in the tent city. This source is poison." Marcus took the bottle back like it was a snake. "How do you even know what you're looking at?" "Because I tested the same contamination pattern in my father's lab 6 years ago." Darius packed his kit away with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to keep moving. Before everything went to hell. Before the accident that killed Dr. James Cole, one of the most promising pharmaceutical chemists in New England. Before the insurance company denied the claim. Before the medical bills for his mother's breakdown devoured their savings. Before Darius's full-ride scholarship to Andover got rescinded when his mother's sister, his only guardian, lost her apartment and couldn't prove stable housing. Before the system decided a brilliant black kid without an address wasn't worth investing in. "You should be in college, man," Marcus said quietly. "Not under a damn bridge." "Yeah, well," Darius shouldered his backpack. Everything he owned fit inside. "The admissions committee doesn't read applications from P.O. boxes in homeless shelters. Trust me, I tried." The conversation died as headlights swept across the underpass. A black sedan, expensive and deliberate, slowed near their encampment. Darius tensed. Drug dealers didn't drive that clean. Cops didn't drive that quiet. The window rolled down. A white man in his 50s, silver hair, tailored coat despite the weather. His gaze swept the shadows until it landed on Darius. "You the kid doing water testing?" Darius stood slowly, measuring exits. "Who's asking?" "Someone who pays attention." The man held out a business card through the window. "Graham Sterling. I run Sterling Biotech. I've heard you're gifted with chemistry. Unusual for someone your age, especially given your circumstances." The name hit like voltage. Sterling Biotech had been his father's biggest research partner. Dr. James Cole had spent his final 2 years working on a breakthrough treatment in Sterling's labs. Something about targeted cellular regeneration, gene therapy for degenerative diseases. Darius had been 12, but he'd read every paper his father brought home. I know who you are. Darius didn't take the card. My father worked for you, James Cole. Sterling's expression shifted. Surprise, then something darker. Recognition. You're James's son. Was. Darius's voice could have cut glass. Until your lab killed him. The rain hammered the silence between them. The investigation ruled it an accident, Sterling said carefully. Equipment failure. Tragic, but my father was the most careful chemist I ever met. Darius stepped closer to the car, water streaming down his face. He triple-checked every protocol, labeled everything in 3 languages, never rushed, never cut corners. And you want me to believe he just screwed up? Left a Bunsen burner unattended near volatile compounds? What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting someone wanted him dead. Darius's hands curled into fists. I'm suggesting his research was worth killing for, and I'm suggesting you know more than you're saying. Sterling studied him for a long moment. In the dim light, Darius could see the man was tired, not sleepy, but worn down by something deeper. Guilt, maybe, or knowledge that weighed like stones. Get in the car, Sterling said finally. Let's talk somewhere dry. So you can finish what someone started? Darius laughed, bitter and sharp. I'm homeless, not stupid. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be gone. Sterling's voice dropped to something almost gentle. James was my friend. I've been trying to find you for 6 months. Your mother's in a treatment facility in Worcester. I know because I've been paying her bills anonymously since your father died. I owe him that much. Maybe I owe you more. The world tilted. Darius grabbed the car door to steady himself. You what? Your mother is safe, medicated, healing, but she can't take you in yet. The facility doesn't allow dependents in their long-term program. Sterling pushed the door open. You want answers about your father? Get in. You want to keep sleeping in the rain and testing water samples for people who can't pay you? Stay here. Your choice. Marcus's voice cut through the rain. Man, be careful. But Darius was already climbing into the back seat, dripping all over Sterling's leather interior. Because the only thing worse than trusting the enemy was not knowing the truth. Sterling handed him a towel. The car pulled away from the underpass, gliding through Boston's wet streets toward the financial district. Neither of them spoke for several blocks. Finally, Sterling broke the silence. You have your father's eyes. Same intensity, like you're solving equations while other people are just breathing. He taught me to see the world as chemistry in motion. Darius stared out at the blurred city lights. Reactions everywhere, catalysts, equilibrium, entropy. He said if you understood the principles, you'd never be lost. He was right. Sterling turned onto Boylston Street. That's why his death doesn't make sense. James was too smart to die from carelessness. Then why did the investigation close so fast? Because someone with money made sure it did. Sterling's knuckles whitened on the armrest. I've suspected for 3 years, but I couldn't prove it. Your father was 6 months away from completing a treatment that would have revolutionized degenerative disease therapy. Gene-targeted cellular regeneration. It would have saved millions of lives and cost certain pharmaceutical companies billions in lost revenue. Darius's breath caught. Someone killed him to bury the research. I believe so, but the work didn't die with him. It's locked in encrypted files I can't access without his password protocols. I've had specialists try. No luck. Sterling glanced back at him. You said you read his papers. Did he ever mention an access key? A phrase? A pattern? I was 12. You were also a prodigy who got a full ride to Andover at 13. Sterling's voice hardened with respect. James used to brag about you. Said you could run spectral analysis before most kids learned algebra. So don't pretend you don't remember. The car pulled up to an elegant restaurant, Alden and Harlow, the kind of place where appetizers cost more than Darius used to spend on groceries in a week. Sterling stepped out, waited for Darius to follow. I'm soaked, Darius protested. I smell like the underpass. You're with me. Nobody will say a word. Sterling handed his keys to the valet. Come on, you haven't eaten a real meal in how long? 4 days. The admission slipped out before Darius could stop it. Sterling's expression went cold with fury. Not at Darius, but at the world that had let this happen. Then let's fix that. Inside, the warmth hit like a physical force. Soft lighting, murmured conversations, the scent of truffle oil and slow-braised meat. A server appeared instantly, guiding them to a private corner table. Eyes followed Darius, his torn jacket, wet jeans, the backpack he refused to set down. But no one said anything. Sterling's presence was a shield. "Order whatever you want," Sterling said, handing him a menu. "Seriously, anything." Darius scanned the options, his stomach twisting with hunger and suspicion in equal measure. "Why are you doing this?" "Because your father saved my daughter's life." Sterling's voice went quiet. 8 years ago, Emma was diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's, rare genetic variant. She was 15. James spent 2 years developing a personalized gene therapy treatment that halted the progression. She's 23 now, finishing her master's degree, living normally. Without him, she'd be in a wheelchair. Or worse. The waiter appeared. Darius ordered soup, steak, pasta, everything his body screamed for. Sterling ordered wine. "I owe James everything," Sterling continued. "When he died, I tried to find you, but you'd already disappeared into the system. Foster care record sealed. Your mother's sister stopped returning calls. It wasn't until one of my research assistants mentioned a homeless teenager doing chemical analysis under the I-90 overpass that I thought, maybe." "So this is charity," Darius's voice edged with bitterness. "Guilt money? This is me trying to do right by a man who deserved better." Sterling leaned forward. "And it's me telling you that you're in danger. If someone killed James to bury his research and you start asking questions, you become a target. I've been invisible for 8 months. Nobody cares about a homeless kid. They will the moment you prove you're James Cole's son." Sterling pulled out his phone, showed Darius a photo. A research paper, his father's name in the byline. James had a protege, someone he trusted with his research, someone who had access to the lab the night he died. Darius's blood went cold. "Who?" "Dr. Victor Huang, brilliant chemist. Your father's assistant for 3 years. He left Sterling Biotech 2 weeks after James died and went to work for North Star Pharmaceuticals, our biggest competitor. Last year, they filed patents for a gene therapy treatment that's remarkably similar to what James was developing. He stole the research." "I think so, but I can't prove it without access to James's encrypted files." Sterling's gaze bore into him. "That's why I need you. If anyone knows how your father thought, it's you." The food arrived. Darius ate mechanically, his mind racing through possibilities. His father's encryption methods had always been elegant, rooted in chemistry, not computer science. Molecular structures, compound names, reaction sequences. "I might be able to crack it," Darius said slowly, "but I'd need access to his original equipment, his notes, the lab where he worked. It's been preserved exactly as he left it. Company policy. Accident sites get sealed for liability reasons." Sterling pulled out a keycard. "This will get you in tonight. The building's mostly empty after 8. You'll have time." "You're just letting me walk into a corporate lab? A homeless kid with no credentials?" "You're not a homeless kid. You're James Cole's son." Sterling slid the keycard across the table. "And if we're going to catch the person who killed your father, we need that research. Before North Star weaponizes it or buries it completely." Darius picked up the keycard, feeling its weight like a promise. Or a trap. "What's in this for you?" he asked. "Really?" Sterling took a slow sip of wine, his expression unreadable. "James's treatment could save thousands of lives. My daughter's alive because of his work. If there's a chance to finish what he started and prove he was murdered, I'm taking it, even if it costs me everything. And if I find proof North Star stole his research, then we burn them to the ground." Sterling's smile was cold and sharp. "Legally, of course. Patent theft, industrial espionage, wrongful death. I've got lawyers who live for this." Darius studied the man across from him. Sterling's daughter had Parkinson's. His father had saved her. The debt was real, that much rang true, but there was something else in Sterling's eyes. Something haunted. "You think you could have stopped it," Darius said quietly. "My father's death. You think if you'd paid more attention, asked more questions—" "I know I could have." Sterling's voice cracked at the edges. James came to me 3 days before he died. Said he thought someone was sabotaging his research. I told him he was being paranoid. I was wrong, and he paid for my mistake. The restaurant hummed around them. Darius finished his meal in silence, feeling the weight of the key card in his pocket. A chance to access his father's work, to find answers, to maybe, finally, prove that Dr. James Cole hadn't died by accident. "There's one more thing," Sterling said as the waiter cleared their plates. "If you're going into that lab, you need to understand the risks. Whoever killed James is still out there. They've built careers on stolen research. If you expose them, they'll come after you. I've been surviving on the streets for 8 months." Darius met his gaze without flinching. "I'm harder to kill than I look." James used to say the same thing. Sterling's expression darkened. He was wrong. They left the restaurant just after 9. The rain had stopped, leaving the city slick and gleaming. Sterling's driver took them across town to a sleek glass tower in the biotech corridor. Sterling Biotech Headquarters, 15 stories of cutting-edge research and corporate ambition. The lobby was deserted. Security waved them through with barely a glance. Sterling's face was clearance enough. They rode the elevator to the 7th floor in silence. When the doors opened, Sterling didn't follow. "Lab 7C, he said, handing Darius a folder. "Your father's notes are in the locked cabinet by the fume hood. Password is your mother's maiden name plus the atomic number of carbon. 6 tries before lockout." "How do you know?" James told me once, years ago. He said it was the only password he'd never forget. Family and chemistry. Sterling held the elevator door. "You've got until midnight. After that, the overnight security shift changes, and I can't guarantee they'll be as easy to bypass. And if I can't crack the encryption, then we're out of options." Sterling stepped back, letting the doors close between them. "Good luck, Darius. Your father would be proud." The elevator descended. Darius stood alone in the sterile hallway, keycard in hand, his father's ghost waiting somewhere in the darkness ahead. Lab 7C was exactly as Sterling described, untouched since the night of the accident. Yellow caution tape still crisscrossed the door. Darius swiped the keycard. The lock clicked. He stepped inside. The smell hit him first, disinfectant and old smoke, the ghost of burned chemicals. The lab was frozen in time. Beakers still on the counter, notebooks open to half-finished equations, his father's handwriting on the whiteboard, outlining a reaction sequence for cellular regeneration therapy. Darius's throat tightened. He'd been 12 the last time he saw this handwriting, back when his father was alive and the future seemed full of impossible promise. He moved to the locked cabinet, punched in the password, Anderson 6, his mother's maiden name, plus carbon's atomic number. The lock beeped green. Inside, 3 leather-bound notebooks and a USB drive sealed in a biohazard bag. Darius pulled them out with shaking hands. The notebooks were dense with his father's precise script, chemical formulas, test results, observations written in the margins. But the USB drive was what mattered. That's where the real data lived. He plugged it into the lab computer. A password prompt appeared immediately. "Enter access key." Darius stared at the screen. His father's encryption was always rooted in chemistry, molecular structures, compound names, reaction sequences that meant something personal. He used to quiz Darius at dinner, turning science into a game. What's the molecular formula for happiness? What compound represents resilience? Think. What would Dad use? Darius flipped through the notebooks, looking for patterns, highlighted compounds, repeated formulas. His father's handwriting blurred as exhaustion crept in. 8 months of sleeping rough, surviving on scraps, running from a world that had decided he didn't matter. But he mattered to his father. Always had. On the last page of the 3rd notebook, Darius found it. A single line, underlined 3 times. C6H12O6 plus hope equals everything. Glucose plus hope equals everything. His father's favorite equation. The molecular formula for basic sugar, the fuel of life, combined with the thing that kept people moving forward. It was sentimental and scientific in equal measure. Pure James Cole. Darius typed it in. Hit enter. The screen flickered. Files began to load. Hundreds of them. Research data, trial results, video logs. and one file labeled simply Evidence. Darius clicked it open. A video appeared. His father, looking exhausted, recording himself in this very lab. The timestamp read 3 days before his death. "If you're watching this, something's happened to me." His father's voice was steady, but his eyes held fear. "I've discovered that Dr. Victor Huang has been copying my research and selling it to North Star Pharmaceuticals. I confronted him today. He denied everything, but I saw the emails on his computer. They're planning to bury my treatment and release an inferior version under their patents. Millions of people will suffer because corporate greed decided their lives aren't worth the profit loss." Dr. Cole leaned closer to the camera. "I've documented everything, the theft, the bribes, the sabotage. It's all in these files. If something happens to me, this is proof. Victor Huang murdered my work. And if I'm dead, he probably murdered me too." The video ended. Darius sat frozen, his father's words echoing in the silent lab. Proof. Finally, undeniable proof. He copied the files to his phone, working fast. Every document, every video, every email exchange between Huang and North Star executives. His father had built an airtight case. Evidence of industrial espionage, patent theft, and conspiracy to suppress life-saving research. A sound in the hallway made Darius freeze. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. He killed the computer screen, grabbed the USB drive, and ducked behind the lab bench. The footsteps stopped outside the door. The lock beeped. Someone with access. The door swung open. A man stepped inside. 50s, Asian, wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a sterling biotech visitor badge, but something about him was wrong. The way he moved. Too careful. Too familiar with the space. Dr. Victor Huang. It had to be. "I know you're in here," Huang said calmly, closing the door behind him. Sterling's security footage showed a teenager entering this lab. James's son, I'm guessing. You have his eyes. Darius stayed perfectly still behind the bench, barely breathing. "I didn't want to kill your father," Huang continued, walking slowly through the lab. "But he was going to ruin everything. Years of work, billions in potential revenue. All because he had some naive idea about making treatments affordable." Huang's voice dripped with contempt. "He didn't understand how the world works. Medicine is a business. Compassion doesn't pay for research. You murdered him." Darius's voice came out steady despite the terror flooding his veins. He stood slowly, facing his father's killer. "You sabotaged the equipment, made it look like an accident." Huang smiled. "Smart boy, just like your father, too smart for your own good. I have his files, all of them, evidence of everything you did." Darius held up his phone. "Patent theft, emails with North Star, video confession. It's over." "Is it?" Huang pulled a syringe from his coat pocket. The liquid inside was clear, viscous. "You're a homeless teenager with a history of mental instability. That's what your records will show after you're found dead from a drug overdose in this very lab. Tragic, really. James's troubled son, driven mad by grief, breaking into his father's old workspace to end his suffering. Sterling knows I'm here. Sterling isn't here." Huang moved closer. "And by the time he figures out what happened, you'll be gone. Just like your father." Darius's mind raced. The lab bench between them. Chemical supplies within reach. His father's voice in his head. "Chemistry is about understanding reactions, Darius. Catalysts, accelerants, neutralization." His hand closed around a beaker of acetic acid, harmless in small amounts, but in Huang's face at close range. "Don't move." The door burst open. Sterling stood in the doorway, phone raised, camera recording. "Every word you just said is on video, Victor. Confession to murder, attempted murder, all of it." Huang froze. The syringe trembled in his hand. "Security is on their way," Sterling continued, his voice like iron. "Along with Boston PD, you're done." Huang's face twisted with rage. He lunged at Darius, and Darius threw the acid. Huang screamed, stumbling back, clawing at his eyes. The syringe clattered to the floor. Sterling rushed forward, kicked it away, and pinned Huang against the wall just as security flooded the lab. Darius collapsed against the bench, shaking. It was over. His father's killer was caught. The truth was out. Sterling crossed to him, gripped his shoulder. You okay? I found the files. Darius held up the USB drive with trembling hands. Everything. His whole case against North Star. It's all here. Then we finish what he started. Sterling's voice was fierce with promise. We expose them. We save the treatment. We make sure your father's work changes the world like it was meant to. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Huang was dragged away in handcuffs, still screaming his innocence. The lab filled with investigators, evidence technicians, lawyers already mobilizing, and Darius stood in the center of it all, holding his father's legacy in his hands. Finally, no longer invisible. The interrogation room at Boston Police Headquarters smelled like burnt coffee and decades of confession. Darius sat across from Detective Maria Santos, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who'd seen enough liars to spot truth when it walked through her door. Sterling stood against the wall, arms crossed, watching like a guardian who'd failed once and wouldn't fail again. Let me get this straight, Santos said, reviewing her notes. You're 17, you've been homeless for 8 months, and you just caught a corporate executive confessing to murder while he was trying to kill you with, what was it? Potassium cyanide dissolved in a lipid suspension, Darius said quietly. Fast-acting, mimics a heart attack if the dose is right. He probably planned to inject me and stage it as a suicide. Santos looked up sharply. How do you know what was in that syringe? I tested it. Darius pulled out his phone, showed her the spectral analysis he'd run using a portable device Sterling had given him in the chaos after Huang's arrest. Took a sample before your forensics team bagged it. Chemical signature matches potassium cyanide at lethal concentration. You tested evidence in an active murder investigation? I tested the substance that was about to be injected into my bloodstream, Darius corrected. There's a difference. Sterling pushed off the wall. Detective, the kid just solved a 3-year-old murder and prevented his own. Maybe we could focus on the confession we recorded instead of criticizing his scientific method. Santos's expression softened slightly. She'd reviewed the video Sterling captured, Huang's complete admission to sabotaging Dr. James Cole's lab equipment, stealing his research, and selling it to North Star Pharmaceuticals. It was prosecutorial gold, the kind of evidence that made careers in closed cases that had haunted detectives for years. The confession is solid, Santos admitted, but Huang's lawyer is already claiming duress, entrapment, illegal surveillance. This is going to get messy. Let it get messy, Sterling said flatly. I've got a legal team that'll bury his defense in motions before trial even starts. What matters is you have a confession, physical evidence, and financial records linking Huang to North Star. That's enough for an indictment. What about the original accident investigation? Darius asked. Someone covered up my father's murder 3 years ago. Equipment inspectors, insurance adjusters, maybe even your own people. They all signed off on calling it accidental death. Santos's jaw tightened. I wasn't on that case, but I'll pull the files. If there was a cover-up, we'll find it. When? Darius leaned forward. Because whoever helped Huang is still out there. They know I have my father's files now. They know I'm talking to police. What's to stop them from finishing what Huang started? The question hung in the air like smoke. Sterling's expression went dark with protective fury. He's staying with me, Sterling said. Private security, controlled access, full protection until this is resolved. I'm not some charity case you can lock in a tower, Darius shot back. I've survived 8 months on the streets. I don't need... You survived because you were invisible, Sterling interrupted. That changed the moment you walked into my lab. Huang knew you were there within hours. How do you think that happened? Darius's blood went cold. Someone told him. Someone with access to my building's security systems, Sterling confirmed. Which means we have a leak, either in my company or in law enforcement. Until we know which, you're not safe anywhere public. Santos stood, gathering her files. I'll coordinate with the DA's office. We'll expedite Huang's arraignment and push for no bail. He's a flight risk with international connections. In the meantime, Mr. Sterling is right. You should stay somewhere secure. What about my mother? Darius asked. If they know about me, they know about her. She's in a treatment facility in Worcester with minimal security. I've already sent a team, Sterling said. Private security firm, fully vetted. Your mother won't know they're there, but she'll be protected. Darius wanted to argue, to reject the help on principle, but exhaustion was catching up fast. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. His clothes still smelled like rain and the underpass. And despite everything, the evidence, the confession, the justice finally within reach, he felt hollowed out, like the revenge he'd imagined for 3 years wasn't filling the space his father's death had carved inside him. "Fine," he said quietly, "but I want to see her, my mother, once this settles down." "Of course," Sterling's voice gentled. "We'll make it happen." They left the police station just after 2 in the morning. Sterling's driver waited at the curb with the engine running. The city was quieter now, the rain-washed streets reflecting neon like broken promises. Darius climbed into the back seat, feeling the leather's warmth seep into his bones. "Where are we going?" he asked as the car pulled into traffic. "My home in Beacon Hill," Sterling replied. "Guest house out back. Private, secure, comfortable. You'll have space to think." "I don't need charity." "It's not charity, it's paying a debt." Sterling's tone left no room for argument. "Your father saved my daughter's life. Let me keep you alive long enough to finish what he started." The drive took 20 minutes through empty streets. Sterling's estate was exactly what Darius expected. Historical brownstone, iron gates, manicured grounds that screamed old Boston money. The guest house sat behind the main residence, a converted carriage house with exposed brick and windows that overlooked a private garden. Inside it was warm and lived in. Books on shelves, art on the walls, a kitchen stocked with real food. Darius stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by the sudden shift from concrete and cardboard to safety and silence. "There's clothes in the bedroom," Sterling said, flipping on lights. "Shower works. Help yourself to anything in the fridge. I'm in the main house if you need me." "Why are you doing this?" Darius asked again, because he still couldn't quite believe it. "Really? Not the debt? Not the guilt? What's the real reason?" Sterling paused at the door, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Because I see James when I look at you. Same brilliance, same stubborn refusal to quit, even when the world's against you. And because I couldn't save him, but maybe I can save you. That's it. That's the real reason." He left before Darius could respond. Alone in the guest house, Darius showered for the first time in a week, scrubbing away layers of street grime and fear. The hot water felt like absolution. He found clothes in the bedroom, jeans that almost fit, a MIT sweatshirt that hung loose on his frame. Someone had thought about this, planned for him. He collapsed onto the bed, intending to rest for just a moment, and fell into sleep so deep it felt like drowning. He woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, Darius thought he was back in his childhood home, his father downstairs making breakfast before heading to the lab. Then reality crashed back. The guest house, Sterling's estate, his father 3 years dead and his killer finally in custody. A knock at the door. "You awake?" Sterling's voice, cautious. "Yeah." Darius sat up, rubbing his face. "Come in." Sterling entered with a tray, coffee, eggs, toast, orange juice. Real food on real plates. He set it on the desk by the window. "Figured you'd be hungry. You slept 14 hours. 14? Darius checked his phone. It was past noon. He'd lost most of the day. "Your body needed it." Sterling poured coffee, handed him a mug. "Detective Santos called this morning. Huang was arraigned. Judge denied bail. He's in county lockup pending trial." "Good." Darius took the coffee, let the warmth steady him. "What about North Star?" "That's where it gets interesting." Sterling sat across from him, his expression grim. "I had my legal team start digging into the patent filings. North Star submitted applications for a gene therapy treatment remarkably similar to your father's work. Same molecular approach, same targeting mechanism, same compound base. They filed 18 months ago, claiming original research by their development team. But my father's notes prove he developed it first. Exactly. Which means we can challenge their patents on grounds of theft. If we win, their entire treatment protocol gets invalidated. Years of development, billions in projected revenue, gone." Darius felt a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. "How long will that take?" "Patent litigation. Could be years. But I'm not interested in waiting." Sterling pulled out his phone, showed Darius a document. I'm filing a federal lawsuit against North Star for industrial espionage, theft of trade secrets, and wrongful death. We're seeking damages and immediate injunction to halt their clinical trials. Can you do that? I can do whatever my lawyers tell me is legal, Sterling said. And they're telling me we have a case that'll make headlines, especially once word gets out that North Star built their flagship treatment on research stolen from a murdered chemist. The media is going to crucify them. That's the idea. Sterling's smile was sharp. I've already got calls from the Globe, the Times, CNN. They all want the story. Brilliant chemist murdered for his breakthrough research, his homeless son solving the case 3 years later. It's catnip for investigative journalists. Darius set down his coffee, suddenly uneasy. I don't want to be a story. I just want justice. Justice requires exposure. North Star's been operating with impunity because nobody knew what they'd done. Now they will. Sterling's voice softened. I know this isn't what you wanted, but your father's work deserves to be recognized, and you deserve credit for finishing what he started. I haven't finished anything. I found evidence, that's all. You cracked encryption that stumped my best analysts. You identified Huang's murder weapon on site. You survived 8 months alone while keeping your mind sharp enough to run chemical analyses for people who had nothing to give you in return. Sterling leaned forward. Darius, you're exactly what your father hoped you'd become. Don't diminish that. The words hit harder than Darius expected. He looked away, blinking against the sudden heat behind his eyes. He wanted me to go to MIT, study chemistry, do something meaningful. Then let's make that happen. Darius's head snapped up. What? Sterling pulled an envelope from his jacket. I made some calls this morning. MIT's admissions office. Explained your situation, the circumstances of your homelessness, your father's murder, the work you've been doing on the streets. They're willing to reconsider your application. I never applied to MIT. You applied to Andover 3 years ago. Full academic scholarship. Rescinded when your housing situation changed. Sterling opened the envelope, showed him the letter inside. Your transcript is still on file. Perfect grades. Science Olympiad winner. Research assistant in your father's lab at 12. You're exactly the kind of student MIT wants. Darius took the letter with shaking hands. It was real. Official MIT letterhead. An invitation to submit a formal application with expedited review based on exceptional circumstances and demonstrated aptitude. I can't afford MIT, he said quietly. Even with financial aid, I'd need housing, food, books. Full scholarship, Sterling interrupted. Tuition, room, board, stipend for expenses. I'm funding it personally through the James Cole Memorial Scholarship. It's already established. You'd be the first recipient. The room tilted. Darius gripped the letter like an anchor. Why would you do this? Because your father was going to send you to MIT himself. He told me so years ago, said you had the kind of mind that needed the best training available. Sterling's voice roughened. I couldn't save James, but I can honor his wishes for you, if you'll let me. Darius couldn't speak. The scholarship, MIT, a future that had died with his father, suddenly resurrected like some impossible gift. But gifts came with strings, they always did. What do you want in return? He asked. I want you to finish your father's research. Sterling met his gaze without flinching. The gene therapy treatment. The files you recovered contain years of work, but they're incomplete. Your father was 6 months from human trials when he died. I want you to pick up where he left off. Complete the research. Save the lives he meant to save. I'm 17. I'm not qualified to run clinical trials. You will be. 4 years at MIT, chemistry degree, maybe a master's program. By the time you're done, you'll have the credentials and the knowledge to finish what James started. Sterling's intensity burned like fever. This treatment could change everything, Darius. Degenerative diseases, genetic disorders, millions of people suffering because North Star buried the cure to protect their profit margins. We can fix that. Together. It was too much, too big, too fast. Darius stood, paced to the window, stared out at the garden without seeing it. 8 months ago, he'd been sleeping under a bridge, testing water for people who had nothing. Now he was standing in a guest house on Beacon Hill, being offered MIT and a chance to complete his father's legacy. What if I fail? The question came out barely above a whisper. What if I'm not smart enough, or the research is too complex, or what if I can't do it? Then you'll have tried, Sterling said simply, which is more than most people manage. But I don't think you'll fail. Your father didn't think so either. Darius turned from the window. You can't know that. Actually, I can. Sterling pulled out his phone again, navigated to a video file. James recorded this 5 years ago, after you won the State Science Olympiad. He sent it to me because he was proud and wanted to brag. Listen. He pressed play. His father's face filled the screen. Younger, healthy, alive. Dr. James Cole sat in his home office, smiling at the camera with the kind of joy that made Darius's chest ache. Graham, you won't believe what Darius did today, his father said, his voice warm with pride. 12 years old, and he just beat seniors from the best prep schools in Massachusetts. Not because he memorized more facts, but because he understood the principles. He sees chemistry the way I do, not as formulas to recite, but as logic to apply. He's going to be extraordinary, better than me, smarter, more creative, more determined. Whatever I accomplish in my career, he'll surpass it. I know that like I know molecular structures. It's inevitable. The video ended. Darius stood frozen, his father's voice echoing in the silence. He's going to be extraordinary. He believed in you, Sterling said quietly. More than he believed in his own work. So when you ask what I want in return for this scholarship, here's the truth. I want you to believe in yourself the way James believed in you. I want you to become the scientist he knew you'd be, and I want you to prove that killing him didn't kill his legacy. Darius wiped his eyes roughly. When would I start? MIT's spring semester begins in January, 3 weeks. Sterling stood, moved to the door. Which gives us time to get you settled, up to speed on your father's research, and prepared for what comes next. Because North Star isn't going to take this lying down. The moment we file suit, they'll fight back with everything they have. Let them, Darius's voice steadied. I've got nothing to lose. That's not true anymore. Sterling's expression was gentle but firm. You've got a future now. A scholarship, a chance. Don't throw it away for revenge. This isn't revenge, it's justice. Sometimes those look the same until you're in the middle of it. Sterling opened his door. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start preparing for the legal battle. It's going to get ugly. He left Darius alone with his father's video, still paused on the phone screen. Darius replayed it twice more, memorizing every word, every inflection. He's going to be extraordinary. His father had said it like prophecy, like certainty. Darius had spent 3 years thinking his father died, believing he'd failed him, that losing the scholarship, dropping out of school, ending up homeless, was somehow proof that Dr. James Cole's faith had been misplaced. But this video proved otherwise. His father had believed in him completely, with the same scientific certainty he applied to molecular bonds and chemical reactions. Now Darius had to decide if he believed it too. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Sterling's legal team descended on the guest house with bankers' boxes full of evidence, patent filings, financial records linking Huang to North Star executives. Darius spent hours reviewing his father's research files, translating complex chemical formulas into language lawyers could understand. Explain it to me like I'm 12, said Catherine Moore, Sterling's lead attorney, a woman with silver hair and a reputation for destroying corporate criminals in court. What makes your father's treatment different from what North Star's developing? Darius pulled up a molecular diagram on his laptop. Standard gene therapy uses viral vectors to deliver modified DNA into cells. It's crude, like using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. My father developed a targeted delivery system using lipid nanoparticles engineered to bond with specific cellular receptors. It's precise, minimizes side effects, and works for conditions other treatments can't touch. And North Star stole this approach? They didn't just steal it, they simplified it to cut costs. Their version uses cheaper compounds that are less stable, more likely to cause immune reactions. It'll work for some patients, but my father's original design would work for everyone. Darius's anger bled into his voice. They traded efficacy for profit margin. Catherine made notes, her expression sharp with professional rage. Can you testify to this in court? I'm 17. You're also your father's research assistant. You cracked his encrypted files, and you understand the chemistry better than most PhD candidates. A jury will find you credible. She glanced at Sterling. Assuming we want to risk putting a teenager on the stand against North Star's legal army? We want justice, Sterling said flatly. Whatever that takes. Justice is messy. Catherine closed her laptop. North Star's going to argue that similarities in research are coincidental, that gene therapy is a developing field with limited approaches. They'll claim Huang acted alone, that the company had no knowledge of theft. And they'll absolutely attack Darius's credibility. Homeless kid with an agenda, no formal credentials, possible mental instability from trauma. Let them try. Darius's voice was ice. I've got his lab notes, his video confession about the theft, 3 years of documented research that predates their patent filing. They can attack me all they want. The chemistry doesn't lie. Catherine smiled, slow and dangerous. I like you, kid. You've got spine. The lawsuit was filed on a Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, it was national news. Darius watched the coverage from Sterling's home office, his stomach twisting as his face appeared on CNN, NBC, Fox. The story had everything media loved: murdered scientist, corporate conspiracy, homeless prodigy solving the case. Reporters camped outside Sterling's gates. His phone rang constantly with interview requests. Turn it off, Sterling said, watching Darius watch himself become public property. It'll drive you crazy. They're calling me the homeless hero, like I'm some feel-good story. Darius's hands clenched. My father was murdered. North Star profited from his death. This isn't heartwarming, it's criminal. Then we make sure the criminal part sticks. Sterling handed him a folder. Detective Santos sent this over. Preliminary forensics from the original accident investigation. Someone altered the equipment inspection reports. Darius scanned the documents. Signatures forged, timestamps adjusted, evidence of systematic cover-up by the same insurance investigator who denied his mother's claim. We need to talk to him, Darius said. The investigator. Find out who paid him to bury the truth. Santos is already on it, but these things take time. Witnesses need immunity deals. Evidence needs verification. We don't have time. Darius stood, paced the office like a caged animal. Every day North Star's treatment stays on the market, people are getting inferior care. Every day Huang's co-conspirators walk free, they're destroying evidence. We need to move faster. We're moving as fast as the law allows. The law let my father's killer walk free for 3 years, Darius shot back. Forgive me if I don't trust the system's timeline. Sterling's expression softened with understanding. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But we do this right, or we do it again. Legal, documented, unassailable. That's how we win. A knock at the door interrupted them. Sterling's daughter Emma entered, 23, sharp eyes, the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. Darius had met her briefly the day before, but she'd kept her distance, watching him with careful assessment. Dad, there's someone at the gate, she said. Says she's Darius's mother. Darius's heart stopped. What? Grace Cole. She showed ID to security. Says she discharged herself from treatment when she saw the news. Emma's gaze shifted to Darius. She's asking for you. The world tilted. His mother. Here. After 8 months of separation, supervised visits denied because he had no stable housing, phone calls that left him hollow because her voice was distant with medication and grief. Let her in, Sterling said immediately. Darius, do you want... But Darius was already moving, through the office, down the hall, out the front door into the cold November air. The gates were opening. A taxi idled in the driveway, and stepping out of the back seat was his mother. Grace Cole looked smaller than he remembered, thinner. Her hair was streaked with more gray. But her eyes, dark and intelligent, the same eyes Darius saw in the mirror, were clear in a way they hadn't been since his father died. Mom, he breathed. She crossed the distance between them in seconds, pulled him into an embrace that smelled like hospital soap and desperate relief. Darius held her like she might disappear, this woman who'd raised him to question everything and believe in science and never quit when the answer mattered. I saw you on the news, she whispered against his shoulder. My baby, solving your father's murder. I couldn't stay away. You're supposed to be in treatment. I discharged myself, against medical advice, but legal. She pulled back, cupped his face in her hands. Darius, are you safe? The news said someone tried to kill you. I'm safe. Sterling's protecting me. Darius gripped her hands. Mom, I found Dad's research, all of it. We're going to finish his treatment, complete his work. Grace's eyes filled. He'd be so proud of you. I know. Darius's voice broke. I saw a video. He said I'd be extraordinary. You are. She touched his face like memorizing it. You always have been. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you. After your father died, I couldn't function. The grief was too much. You're here now. That's what matters. Sterling approached carefully, giving them space. Mrs. Cole, I'm Graham Sterling. Your husband saved my daughter's life. I owe him everything. Grace studied him with the same analytical intensity her son had inherited. You're keeping Darius safe? I am, and I'd like to keep you safe too. My guest house has room. Security is already in place. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. I can't accept charity. It's not charity, Darius interrupted. It's letting someone help for once. Please, Mom, stay. Grace looked between them, her son, alive and brilliant and fighting for justice, and the stranger offering sanctuary in a world that had taken everything else. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but only until this is settled. I'm not going to be a burden. You're not a burden, Sterling said gently. Your family. James's family. That makes you mine too. They moved inside together, Grace leaning on Darius for support, Sterling guiding them toward warmth and safety. And for the first time in 3 years, Darius felt something like hope taking root beneath the anger. His mother was here. His father's killer was in custody. The truth was finally coming to light. But in the shadows beyond Sterling's gates, other eyes were watching. North Star executives receiving alerts about the lawsuit, corporate lawyers strategizing how to destroy a teenager's credibility. And somewhere in the darkness, the people who'd helped Huang cover up murder were calculating their next move. The war was just beginning. The first attack came on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after Grace arrived at Sterling's estate. Darius was in the guest house kitchen making coffee when his phone lit up with notifications, dozens of them, all at once, like a digital avalanche. He unlocked the screen and his blood went cold. Someone had leaked his juvenile records. Every mistake, every documented struggle from the months after his father's death was now plastered across social media. A school fight that had earned him 3 days suspension, a shoplifting charge from when he was 14 and starving, dismissed after community service. Sessions with a court-appointed therapist after his mother's breakdown, notes describing him as emotionally volatile and potentially unstable. The headlines wrote themselves. Homeless hero or troubled teen, dark past of student accusing North Star. Mental health records raise questions about Cole case credibility. Sources say key witness has history of violence, theft. Darius's hands shook as he scrolled through the articles. They'd taken the worst moments of his life, the grief, the desperation, the survival instincts that kept him alive when the system abandoned him, and weaponized them into character assassination. Darius? His mother appeared in the doorway, still in her robe, concern etched across her face. What's wrong? He couldn't speak, just handed her the phone and watched her expression crumble as she read. This is my fault, Grace whispered. The therapy sessions were part of my treatment plan. Those records were supposed to be sealed. Someone unsealed them. Sterling's voice came from behind her, sharp with controlled fury. He'd let himself in through the back door, already holding his own phone with the same poisonous headlines. North Star's legal team, they filed a motion claiming Darius's mental health history is relevant to his credibility as a witness. Judge granted limited access for evaluation purposes. So they leaked it to the press, Darius said flatly. Destroyed my reputation before I even get to trial. They're playing dirty because they're scared. Catherine Moore swept in behind Sterling, her silver hair pulled back like she was ready for war. This is what corporations do when the evidence is against them. Attack the messenger. Make the case about you instead of about them. Well, it's working. Darius threw his phone onto the counter. Look at the comments. Half the internet thinks I'm lying about everything. Catherine picked up his phone, scrolled for 10 seconds, then set it down with deliberate calm. The internet isn't a jury. These people don't matter. What matters is the evidence. Your father's files, Huang's confession, the patent theft documentation. That's what wins in court. If we even get to court, Grace said quietly. They'll file motions to dismiss based on Darius's credibility. They'll argue he's an unreliable witness with documented mental health issues. Let them argue. Sterling's voice was ice. We'll counter with medical experts who will testify that grief and trauma don't equal dishonesty. We'll show that every one of those incidents happened during the worst period of Darius's life, when he was homeless and fighting to survive. And we'll remind the judge that none of it changes the chemistry. The research speaks for itself. Does it? Darius looked at Sterling with something close to desperation. Because right now it feels like the truth doesn't matter. Only the story. And they're better at telling stories than we are. Emma entered then, holding a laptop, her expression grim. It gets worse. North Star just released a statement claiming they've identified significant flaws in Dr. Cole's original research. They're saying his treatment was unstable, potentially dangerous, and that their modifications actually made it safer. That's a lie, Darius said immediately. My father's design was flawless. North Star cheapened it to cut production costs. Prove it. Emma turned the laptop so he could see the screen. North Star's chief scientific officer, a distinguished researcher named Dr. Patricia Vance, was giving an interview to CNBC. We deeply respect Dr. Cole's contributions to the field, but our internal review has revealed concerning instabilities in his lipid nanoparticle design. Our team made necessary adjustments to ensure patient safety. Any suggestion that we stole his work is both false and defamatory. She spoke with the calm authority of someone who'd spent decades building credibility. Someone juries would believe over a traumatized teenager. She's lying through her teeth, Catherine said, but she's good at it. Then we need someone better. Sterling pulled out his phone, started typing. I'm calling in every favor I have. Researchers who worked with James. Colleagues who reviewed his papers. We'll build a wall of expert testimony that North Star can't break through. They'll have their own experts, Grace said. This becomes a battle of credentials. And Darius has none. The words landed like a physical blow. Darius looked at his mother, saw the fear beneath her practical assessment. She wasn't wrong. He was 17, homeless until last week, with a GED instead of a diploma and therapeutic records that screamed unreliable. Against North Star's army of PhDs and corporate lawyers, he was outmatched. Maybe I shouldn't testify, he said quietly. Maybe we let the evidence speak and keep me out of it. No. Sterling's voice cut through the room like a blade. That's exactly what they want. You disappear, the case becomes abstract. Stolen patents, corporate espionage, numbers on paper. But you are the human cost. You're proof that their theft destroyed lives. A jury needs to see that. They need to see a credible witness, Darius shot back, not some damaged kid they can dismiss as crazy. You're not crazy. Grace crossed to him, gripped his shoulders. You survived something that would have broken most people. You kept learning, kept thinking, kept fighting when you had every reason to give up. That's not instability, that's strength. The media doesn't see it that way. The media is noise. Catherine's tone was absolute. What matters is what 12 jurors see when you explain the chemistry, show them your father's work, and prove that North Star built their empire on murder and theft. Can you do that? Darius met her gaze, saw the challenge there. She was asking if he could stand in front of strangers and expose every wound, every scar, every moment of weakness, and then prove it didn't make him a liar. I can do it, he said, but I need help. I need to understand the legal strategy, the cross-examination tactics, everything they'll use to break me. Because if I go down on that stand, my father's work dies with me. Then we prepare you. Sterling moved to the table, started spreading out documents. Catherine, clear your schedule. We're running mock trials until Darius can answer hostile questions in his sleep. Emma, I need you coordinating with our scientific consultants, anyone who can validate James's research. Grace, I want you working with our victim's advocate. Your testimony about James's death and its impact will be crucial. What about the leak? Emma asked. Someone in law enforcement or the courts gave North Star access to sealed records. That's a crime. Detective Santos is investigating, Sterling said. But it'll take time to trace the breach. Meanwhile, we assume everything we do is being watched. No private calls on unsecured lines, no sensitive documents left unattended. We're in a war now, and North Star plays to win. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Catherine drilled Darius for hours each day, playing the role of North Star's lead counsel with savage precision. She attacked his credibility, his motives, his mental health. She twisted his words, set logical traps, forced him to defend decisions made during the worst moments of his life. "So you stole food when you were homeless," she said during one session, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "How can the jury trust anything you say when you're a documented thief?" "I took a sandwich from a convenience store when I hadn't eaten in 3 days," Darius replied, keeping his voice steady. "I was 14, hungry, desperate. I'm not proud of it, but I'd do it again to survive." Survival. Interesting word choice. Would you lie to survive? Fabricate evidence against a corporation if it meant getting off the streets? "I don't need to fabricate evidence. The chemistry is real. My father's files are real. Huang's confession is real." But your interpretation of that chemistry could be biased, couldn't it? A traumatized teenager desperate to blame someone for his father's death might see conspiracy where there's only coincidence. "The patents are identical," Darius said, pulling up molecular diagrams on his laptop. "Same targeting mechanism, same lipid composition, same compound ratios. That's not coincidence, that's theft. And I can prove it." Catherine dropped the attack posture, nodded with grim approval. "Better. You stayed calm, focused on facts, didn't let emotion override logic. But North Star's lawyers will be worse than me. They'll make you relive your father's death, your mother's breakdown, every night you spent under that bridge. They'll turn your pain into ammunition. Can you handle that?" Darius thought about his father's video, the certainty in Dr. Cole's voice when he said his son would be extraordinary, the belief that had survived 3 years of death and silence. "I can handle it," he said, "because the alternative is letting them win. And I won't do that." While Darius prepared for trial, Sterling's team was building their case like constructing a cathedral, piece by meticulous piece. Expert witnesses were interviewed. Research was validated. Financial records linking Huang to North Star executives were documented and cross-referenced. Detective Santos uncovered the insurance investigator who'd altered the accident reports, a man named Frank Delacroix, who'd accepted $50,000 to make Dr. Cole's death look accidental. He'd flipped the moment Santos showed him evidence of wire transfers from a North Star shell company, agreeing to testify in exchange for immunity. "He'll confirm the cover-up," Santos told them during a meeting at Sterling's office. Huang paid him through intermediaries to falsify the equipment inspection. Delacroix didn't know why at the time, just took the money and buried the evidence. "Will a jury believe him?" Grace asked. "A corrupt investigator turning witness?" "Juries love redemption stories," Catherine said. "We frame him as a man who made a terrible choice and is now trying to make it right. Combined with the financial records and Huang's confession, it's devastating." What about Dr. Vance? Emma had been tracking North Star's chief scientific officer obsessively. "She's doing media rounds claiming their research is independent. Someone needs to discredit her." "We're working on it." Sterling pulled up an email on his phone. "I've got 3 former North Star researchers willing to testify that Vance personally supervised the incorporation of James's stolen data into their treatment protocol. They're risking their careers to tell the truth." "Why would they do that?" Darius asked. "Because good people eventually get tired of lying." Sterling's expression was hard. "And because I'm offering them positions at Sterling Biotech if North Star retaliates. Safety net in exchange for honesty." The pieces were falling into place, but North Star wasn't finished fighting. The second attack came during Thanksgiving week. Darius was reviewing chemistry notes in the guest house when his mother burst through the door, her face white with shock. "They're saying you plagiarized your father's work," she said, shoving her tablet at him. "That you don't actually understand the research. You just memorized his notes and are pretending to be a genius." The article was on a major science blog, written by an anonymous industry insider. It claimed that Darius's analysis of his father's treatment was derivative at best, fraudulent at worst. That he'd been coached by Sterling's team to sound intelligent but couldn't possibly grasp chemistry at that level. That his entire testimony would be scripted performance, not genuine expertise. "This is ridiculous," Darius said, but his voice wavered. "I've been studying chemistry since I was 8 years old. Can you prove that?" Grace's question wasn't cruel, just practical. "Do you have test scores, teacher evaluations, anything that documents your ability?" "I was homeless for 8 months. I don't have documentation of anything." "Then we need to create it." Sterling appeared in the doorway, already strategizing. "Catherine, can we get Darius evaluated by an independent chemist? Someone with credentials who can verify his knowledge?" "It'll take time," Catherine said. "And North Star will claim we shopped for a friendly expert." "So we make it public." Emma was scrolling through her phone. "Challenge North Star to test Darius themselves. Live, on camera. Put his knowledge against their best chemists and see who comes out on top." "That's insane," Grace said. "You'd be gambling everything on the truth." Darius stood, feeling something shift inside him. "I know my father's research. I understand the chemistry better than anyone except him. If North Star wants to test me, let them. I'll prove I'm not a fraud." Sterling studied him carefully. "You're sure? Because if you fail, the entire case collapses." "I won't fail." Darius's voice was steel. "Set it up." The challenge was issued through Catherine's office the next day. Darius Cole would submit to examination by a panel of independent chemists selected jointly by both legal teams. The test would be recorded and made public. If he passed, North Star would cease questioning his expertise. If he failed, Sterling would withdraw the lawsuit. North Star accepted within hours. They thought they had him cornered. The examination was scheduled for the following Monday at MIT's chemistry department. Neutral ground, academic oversight, no room for accusations of bias. Darius spent the weekend in Sterling's library, reviewing his father's research, running practice problems, preparing like his life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. Grace watched him work with a mixture of pride and terror. "Your father used to study like this before big presentations. Obsessive, meticulous, refusing to sleep until he'd mastered every variable." "Did it work?" "Every time." She touched his shoulder gently. "He never failed when it mattered. Neither will you." Monday arrived cold and clear. The examination room at MIT was austere. White walls, long table, cameras positioned to capture everything. 3 chemists sat waiting. Dr. Helen Rodriguez from Harvard, Dr. James Park from Stanford, Dr. Margaret Chen from Yale. World-class researchers with no stake in the case, selected for their reputations and inability to be bought. Darius entered with Sterling and Catherine flanking him like guards. Across the room, North Star's legal team watched with predatory focus. Dr. Vance sat among them, her expression confident. She thought this was already won. Dr. Rodriguez spoke first, her voice neutral. "Mr. Cole, we're here to evaluate your understanding of your father's gene therapy research. We'll ask questions ranging from basic principles to advanced applications. Answer honestly. If you don't know something, say so. Attempting to bluff will be obvious and noted. Understood?" "Understood." Darius sat, folded his hands on the table to hide their trembling. "Let's begin. Explain the fundamental mechanism of lipid nanoparticle-mediated gene delivery." Darius took a breath, found his center, and began to speak. The words flowed like muscle memory, technical and precise. He explained how lipid nanoparticles encapsulated modified DNA, crossed cellular membranes through endocytosis, released their payload in the cytoplasm. He detailed the chemical composition his father had developed, specific ratios of ionizable lipids, structural lipids, cholesterol, and PEG lipids that created stable particles with minimal immune response. Dr. Park jumped in. "Your father's research claimed a 92% transfection efficiency. How did he achieve that when standard nanoparticles plateau around 70%? "Surface modification," Darius replied immediately. "He engineered lipids with targeting ligands that bound to specific cellular receptors. Instead of random uptake, the nanoparticles actively sought their target cells. It's like the difference between flooding a field and using irrigation. Same amount of water, better results." Dr. Chen leaned forward. Describe the potential failure modes of this system. Aggregation, if the particle size distribution is too broad. Immune recognition, if the PG coating degrades prematurely. Off-target effects if the ligand binding isn't specific enough. Toxicity, if the ionizable lipid concentration exceeds cellular tolerance thresholds. Darius pulled up molecular diagrams on the tablet they'd provided. My father addressed each of these with quality control protocols and compound modifications. His treatment had a safety profile better than anything currently on the market. The questions came faster, harder, diving into synthesis methods, stability testing, clinical trial design. Darius answered each one with growing confidence, not just reciting his father's work, but explaining it, defending it, proving he understood the principles beneath the data. 2 hours in, Dr. Rodriguez called a break. The chemists huddled in private consultation while Darius sat alone at the table, exhausted and wired in equal measure. Catherine leaned close. "You're doing brilliantly. They're running out of ways to test you." "They haven't asked about North Star's modifications yet," Darius said quietly. "That's where the real battle is." He was right. When the examination resumed, Dr. Park pulled up North Star's patent filing. North Star claims their treatment differs from Dr. Cole's original design in 3 key ways. First, they use a different ionizable lipid. Second, they modified the targeting ligand structure. Third, they adjusted the pig lipid ratio. Can you explain why these changes would be necessary if they weren't building on stolen research? Darius felt the trap in the question. North Star's lawyers were watching him like hawks, waiting for him to slip, to claim their modifications were meaningless when they were documented improvements. "The changes aren't necessary," he said carefully. "They're cost-cutting measures. North Star's ionizable lipid is cheaper to synthesize but has a narrower pH response range. It works for some applications but fails in the complex cellular environments my father was targeting. Their modified ligand has lower binding specificity, which increases off-target effects, and their pig ratio adjustment reduces circulation time, meaning patients need higher doses for the same therapeutic effect." "So you're claiming their treatment is inferior?" "I'm claiming it's different by design, optimized for manufacturing economics rather than patient outcomes." Darius pulled up comparative data. "My father's treatment would cost more to produce but would work for a broader patient population with fewer side effects. North Star chose profit over efficacy. The chemistry proves it." Dr. Vance stood abruptly across the room. "This is absurd. You're letting a teenager speculate about research he's never conducted." "Dr. Vance, please sit down," Dr. Rodriguez said sharply. "Mr. Cole is answering our questions, not yours." Vance sat, but her expression promised retaliation. Dr. Chen asked the final question. "If you were to complete your father's research, what would be your next step?" Darius paused, considering. This wasn't about defending the past. It was about proving he could carry the work forward. "I'd run stability studies on the lipid formulations under physiological conditions," he said. "My father's preliminary data was strong, but you need long-term testing to verify shelf life and degradation pathways. Then I'd optimize the manufacturing process for scale-up. Lab synthesis is different from production. Finally, I'd design phase 1 clinical trials focusing on safety endpoints before moving to efficacy. The treatment works in theory and in animal models. Now we need to prove it works in humans." The chemists exchanged glances. Dr. Rodriguez made a final note, then looked directly at the cameras. "Based on Mr. Cole's responses, it is our professional opinion that he possesses advanced understanding of gene therapy chemistry, lipid nanoparticle design, and pharmaceutical development. His knowledge is consistent with years of study and direct mentorship from an expert researcher. We find no evidence of fraud or coaching. He understands this material at a level appropriate for a graduate student, despite his age and circumstances." The room erupted. North Star's lawyers were shouting objections. Sterling was shaking hands with Catherine. Grace was crying. And Darius sat at the table, feeling 3 years of doubt and grief finally crack open to let something like vindication pour through. He'd proven himself. Against their attacks, their lawyers, their attempts to destroy his credibility, he'd stood his ground and won. But as the cameras stopped rolling and people began filing out, Darius caught Dr. Vance's expression across the room. She wasn't defeated. She was calculating. And in that moment, he realized the examination wasn't the end of their attacks. It was just the beginning of something worse. That night, back at Sterling's estate, they celebrated quietly. Grace made dinner, her first home-cooked meal in years. Emma opened wine. Sterling toasted to truth and justice and the power of scientific integrity. But Darius couldn't shake the feeling that they were celebrating too soon. North Star had lost the battle over his credibility. Now they'd escalate to something more dangerous. He was right. At 3 a.m, his phone rang. Detective Santos, her voice tight with urgency. Darius, we have a problem. Someone just tried to access your mother's medical records at the treatment facility. They were looking for anything they could use against her: psychiatric evaluations, medication history, commitment orders. Did they get in? No, security flagged the attempt. But Darius is... Santos paused. The login credentials belonged to a paralegal at Sterling Biotech. The world stopped. That's impossible. Sterling's team wouldn't... I know. Which means either someone's framing Sterling or you have a mole inside your own legal team. Either way, you're compromised. Watch your back. The call ended. Darius sat in the darkness of the guest house, his father's research files open on his laptop, and realized that North Star wasn't just fighting in court anymore. They were fighting everywhere, and the people Darius trusted might already be infiltrated. Darius didn't sleep after Santos's call. He sat in the darkness watching security camera feeds on his laptop, studying every person who'd entered Sterling's estate in the past 2 weeks. Staff, lawyers, consultants. Any one of them could be feeding information to North Star. Any one of them could be the reason his mother's medical files had been targeted. At dawn, he found Sterling in the main house kitchen, already dressed despite the early hour, reviewing documents with the intensity of someone who'd also spent the night awake. You heard, Darius said. It wasn't a question. Sterling looked up, his expression carved from granite. Santos called me an hour ago. I've been going through personnel files since. Every paralegal, every assistant, everyone with access to our case materials. He pushed a folder across the counter. This is the one whose credentials were used, Rachel Martinez. She's worked for Catherine's firm for 3 years. Clean background, stellar reviews, no financial problems that would make her vulnerable to bribery. So either she's been playing a long game, or someone stole her login. I'm betting on stolen. Too obvious otherwise. Sterling pulled up security footage on his tablet. But that means whoever took her credentials has physical access to the firm's offices. Someone on our side is helping them. Darius opened the folder, studied Rachel Martinez's photo. She looked young, maybe 25, with dark hair and the kind of earnest expression that suggested she still believed law was about justice. Does she know her account was compromised? Catherine's bringing her in this morning. We'll find out. Sterling's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening. That's our cybersecurity team. They traced the access attempt to an IP address in Cambridge. Coffee shop with public Wi-Fi. No cameras, no way to identify who was there. Professional? Very. Sterling poured coffee with hands that were steady despite the rage burning beneath his calm. North Star's not just fighting us in court anymore. They're mounting a full intelligence operation, hacking our systems, targeting witnesses, trying to find leverage they can use to force us to settle. We're not settling. No, we're not. But we need to be smarter. Sterling handed Darius a mug. From now on, all sensitive communications go through encrypted channels only. No emails, no phone calls, face-to-face meetings in secured locations. We assume everything digital is compromised. Grace appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a robe, her expression tight with worry. I heard voices. What happened? Darius told her about the attempt to access her medical records, watched her face go pale as the implications sank in. They want to use my breakdown against us, she said quietly. Claim I'm unstable, that my testimony about James's death can't be trusted. They can want whatever they like, Sterling said. Your medical records are protected by federal privacy law. Even if they'd gotten access, they couldn't use them in court without your consent. But they could leak them to the press. Grace sat heavily at the counter. Just like they leaked Darius's juvenile records, turn my grief into a weapon against my own son. Mom, it doesn't matter what they leak. Darius moved to her side. We have the evidence, Dad's files, Huang's confession, the financial records. They're attacking us because the facts are on our side and they know it. Then why does it feel like we're losing? The question hung in the air like smoke. Because in some ways they were losing, not the legal battle, but the war of public perception. Every day brought new attacks, new headlines questioning their credibility. North Star had unlimited resources and no moral boundaries. Sterling's team was playing by rules the opposition had already abandoned. Emma entered through the back door holding her phone like evidence. You need to see this. North Star just filed an emergency motion to dismiss the case. They're claiming that Dr. Huang acted alone, that the company had no knowledge of theft, and that prosecuting them amounts to corporate defamation based on one employee's criminal actions. That's absurd, Catherine's voice came from behind her. She swept into the kitchen with the controlled fury of a lawyer who'd been up all night fighting battles. Huang's emails directly reference conversations with North Star executives. We have documented approval for the stolen research integration. The motion is garbage. Garbage that'll buy them time, Sterling said. How long until the judge rules? Could be days, could be weeks. They're flooding the docket with procedural motions, trying to delay trial until media attention dies down. Catherine accepted coffee from Sterling with a nod of thanks. Meanwhile, I brought Rachel in early. She's waiting in my car. Says she never authorized access to medical records and her laptop was stolen from her apartment 2 weeks ago. She filed a police report but didn't think to mention it to us because nothing sensitive was on the device, or so she thought. 2 weeks ago, Darius pulled up a timeline on his phone. That's right after we filed the lawsuit. Someone targeted her specifically, which means they knew she had access to case files. Catherine's expression darkened. Someone's been watching us, mapping our team, identifying vulnerabilities. This is corporate espionage at a sophisticated level. Can we prove North Star ordered it? Grace asked. Not yet, but we're building a pattern. Sterling opened his laptop, showed them a spreadsheet. 3 paralegals targeted. 2 expert witnesses received threats. 1 journalist investigating the case had their sources exposed. Every incident points back to protecting North Star's interests, but the execution is clean enough to maintain deniability. So what do we do? Darius heard the frustration in his own voice. Keep getting attacked until they find something that sticks? No. Sterling's voice went cold with decision. We go on offense. Catherine, I want subpoenas for every email, every phone record, every financial transaction between North Star executives and anyone connected to these attacks. If they're running an intelligence operation, they're leaving digital footprints. We find them. That'll take weeks to execute. The judge will fight us on scope. Then we make it public. Call a press conference. Lay out every attack, every attempt to intimidate witnesses, every breach of privacy law. Force North Star to defend their tactics instead of attacking ours. That's risky, Emma said. You'd be admitting we've been compromised. It makes us look weak. Or it makes us look like victims of corporate corruption, which is exactly what we are. Sterling stood, pacing the kitchen with restless energy. North Star thinks they can outspend us, outmaneuver us, grind us down until we give up. I want them to know we're not giving up. We're escalating. Catherine considered this, her lawyer's mind calculating angles and risks. A press conference could backfire if we don't have ironclad proof. North Star will claim we're making baseless accusations to cover our weak case. Then we don't make baseless accusations. We present facts. Rachel's stolen laptop, the medical records access attempt. The timeline showing every attack coincided with our legal victories. Sterling's gaze swept the room. We're not asking people to believe us. We're showing them a pattern and letting them draw their own conclusions. I'll draft a statement, Catherine said. But Darius, you'd need to speak. Your face, your story. That's what makes this real for people watching. Darius felt every eye in the room turn to him. The idea of standing in front of cameras again, exposing himself to more scrutiny, more attacks, made his stomach clench. But staying silent while North Star dismantled their case piece by piece felt worse. I'll do it, he said. When? This afternoon. I'll coordinate with media outlets set up at the courthouse steps. Public location, plenty of witnesses, impossible for North Star to claim we're hiding. Catherine was already typing notes into her phone. We go at 3 p.m., That gives us time to prepare your statement and brief friendly journalists. The next 5 hours were a blur of preparation. Catherine drilled Darius on talking points, teaching him to stay calm under hostile questions, to pivot from attacks back to facts. Grace helped him choose clothes that looked presentable without seeming staged. Sterling coordinated with his security team to ensure the press conference location was safe. At 2:30, they drove to the courthouse in a convoy. Sterling's car, Catherine's SUV, a security vehicle trailing behind. The media was already gathering, cameras and reporters crowding the steps like a feeding frenzy. Darius saw the North Star logo on several press credentials. They'd sent their own people to control the narrative. "Remember," Catherine said as they parked, "stay focused on the facts. Don't let emotion override logic, and if someone asks a question you can't answer, say so. Honesty is more powerful than trying to bluff." Darius nodded, his mouth dry. He stepped out of the car into the cold December air, feeling the weight of cameras tracking his movement. Sterling moved to his left, Catherine to his right, forming a protective wall. Grace stayed close behind, her presence a steadying anchor. They climbed the courthouse steps. The crowd surged forward, voices overlapping in a chaos of questions. Catherine raised her hands for silence. "Thank you for coming. We have a brief statement, then we'll take questions." She gestured to Darius. "Darius Cole will speak first." Darius stepped to the microphone, looked out at the sea of faces and cameras. For a moment, his mind went blank. All the preparation, all the talking points evaporated in the glare of attention. Then he saw his mother's face in the crowd, steady and certain, and his father's words echoed in his memory. "You're going to be extraordinary." "My name is Darius Cole," he began, his voice stronger than he felt. 3 years ago, my father, Dr. James Cole, was murdered in his laboratory. His death was ruled an accident, but we now have proof it was deliberate, sabotage designed to steal his research and bury a treatment that could have saved thousands of lives. The crowd was silent, listening. Darius continued, "Dr. Victor Huang has confessed to the murder. He admitted he was working with North Star Pharmaceuticals to steal my father's gene therapy research and suppress it so they could release an inferior version under their own patents. We have emails, financial records, and testimony that prove this conspiracy. But instead of accepting responsibility, North Star has chosen to attack everyone involved in bringing the truth to light." He pulled out a printed timeline, held it up to the cameras. "In the past 3 weeks, our legal team has been hacked. Witnesses have been threatened. My juvenile records were illegally leaked to the press. Someone attempted to access my mother's medical files to use her grief against her. Every time we take a step toward justice, North Star takes a step toward intimidation." "Are you accusing North Star of criminal activity?" a reporter shouted. "I'm stating facts," Darius said calmly. "A paralegal on our team had her laptop stolen. That laptop was then used to attempt unauthorized access to protected medical records. The theft occurred 2 weeks after we filed our lawsuit. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern." Another reporter pushed forward. "North Star claims you're an unreliable witness with a history of mental health issues. How do you respond?" "I respond with chemistry." Darius pulled out his tablet, showed molecular diagrams to the cameras. 3 independent experts from Harvard, Stanford, and Yale examined my understanding of my father's research. They confirmed I possess graduate-level knowledge of gene therapy. North Star can attack my credibility all they want, but they can't change the chemistry. The evidence speaks for itself. "What do you want from this lawsuit?" someone called out. Darius paused, choosing his words carefully. "I want my father's murder acknowledged. I want the people who killed him to face consequences. And I want his treatment completed and made available to patients who need it. That's what he would have wanted. That's what I'm fighting for." The questions came faster then, a barrage of voices and cameras. Catherine stepped in, fielding the hostile ones, redirecting to facts. Sterling added weight with his corporate authority. Grace spoke briefly about losing her husband and watching her son fight to honor his memory. 20 minutes later, it was over. They retreated to the cars while reporters shouted follow-up questions. Darius collapsed into the back seat, adrenaline draining away and leaving him hollowed out. "You did well," Sterling said. "Very well. That'll be national news by tonight." "Did it matter?" Darius asked. "Or did we just give them more ammunition?" "We shifted the narrative. That matters." Catherine was already checking media coverage on her phone. "Look, AP picked it up, Reuters is running quotes, CNN wants a follow-up interview. You humanized the case. Made it about more than corporate litigation. Emma turned around from the front seat. Twitter's already calling North Star out. Hashtag Justice for Cole is trending. People are angry about the intimidation tactics. Anger doesn't win court cases, Grace said quietly. No, but it creates pressure. Sterling's expression was calculating. North Star's stock dropped 2% during your statement, Darius. Their board of directors is watching. If public sentiment turns hard enough against them, they might actually settle to stop the bleeding. I don't want a settlement, Darius said fiercely. I want a verdict. I want a jury to say publicly that they murdered my father and stole his work. Then we prepare for trial. Catherine closed her phone. Judge hasn't ruled on the dismissal motion yet, but after today's press conference, denying us a trial would look like protecting corporate criminals. We're going forward. They drove back to Sterling's estate in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Darius stared out the window at Boston sliding past, the city where his father had worked, where he'd died, where his son now fought to resurrect his legacy from the ashes of murder and theft. That night, the counterattack came. Darius was reviewing trial preparation notes when his phone exploded with notifications. Someone had leaked the full contents of his father's research files to a science forum, claiming they proved Dr. Cole's treatment was unstable and dangerous. Anonymous experts were tearing apart the methodology, questioning the safety data, suggesting James Cole had been a reckless researcher who'd cut corners in pursuit of glory. It's character assassination, Darius said, showing Sterling the forum posts. They're taking his work out of context, misrepresenting the results. Can you refute it? Sterling asked. Yes, but it'll take time. Every claim needs a detailed response, and by the time I post corrections, they'll have moved on to new attacks. Darius scrolled through page after page of toxic comments. This is what they want, to drown the truth in so much noise that nobody knows what to believe anymore. Then we don't play their game. Sterling made a decision. Catherine, get me the best science communicator you know. Someone who can take James's research and explain it in terms the public understands. We're making a video, clear, factual, unassailable. We put it everywhere, and we don't let North Star's lies stand unchallenged. That'll cost, I don't care what it costs. Sterling's voice was absolute. This is about protecting a murdered man's reputation. We do it right. The next 3 days were chaos. Sterling hired Dr. Sarah Chen, a renowned science communicator who'd made a career translating complex research into accessible content. She interviewed Darius for hours, had him walk through his father's treatment step by step, explaining the chemistry in terms anyone could understand. Your father wasn't cutting corners, Dr. Chen said during one session. He was being meticulous to the point of obsession. These safety protocols are industry-leading. Anyone claiming otherwise is either ignorant or lying. Can you prove that in a video? Darius asked. Watch me. Dr. Chen worked with a production team Sterling hired, creating a 15-minute documentary that laid out Dr. Cole's research with crystal clarity. She showed the molecular mechanisms, the safety testing, the peer review process. She interviewed the 3 chemists who'd evaluated Darius's knowledge. She presented the timeline of North Star's theft with receipts and evidence. The video dropped on YouTube, Twitter, and every major platform simultaneously. Within 6 hours, it had 3 million views. Within 12, it was trending globally. Comments poured in from scientists, patients, families affected by degenerative diseases, all expressing outrage that life-saving research had been suppressed for corporate profit. North Star's stock dropped another 5%. Their PR team went into overdrive, issuing statements and counterclaims. But the narrative had shifted. The public was listening now, and they were angry. This is working, Emma said, monitoring social media metrics. North Star's getting hammered. Their executives are being called to testify before Congress about pharmaceutical ethics. This is bigger than our lawsuit now. Good, Sterling said. The more pressure they're under, the harder it is for them to keep attacking us. But North Star wasn't done. They were just changing tactics. The call came at midnight. Detective Santos, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. They arrested Victor Huang's wife, she said, charged her with conspiracy to commit murder, claiming she knew about the sabotage and helped cover it up. Darius sat up in bed, instantly awake. Did she? According to the evidence? No, she's a middle school teacher who had no idea what her husband was doing. But North Star's lawyers convinced the DA to file charges anyway. They're using her as leverage, trying to force Huang to recant his confession in exchange for dropping charges against his wife. That's illegal, isn't it? Witness intimidation? It's borderline. Huang's already in custody, so technically they're not intimidating him. They're just creating circumstances that might make him want to change his testimony. Santos's disgust was palpable. And it gets worse. Huang's lawyer is claiming his confession was coerced, says Sterling's security team threatened him, that the recording was obtained illegally. That's a lie. I was there. Sterling just filmed him confessing. I know, but now we have to prove it, which means more delays, more legal battles, more opportunities for North Star to muddy the waters. Darius closed his eyes, felt the exhaustion settling into his bones like lead. Every victory brought 3 new attacks. Every step forward required fighting through walls of opposition. How long could they sustain this before something broke? What do we do? He asked. We fight, Santos said simply. I'm working with the DA to review the charges against Huang's wife. If I can prove they're baseless, they'll get dropped. Meanwhile, Sterling's team needs to document everything about how that confession was obtained. Chain of custody, timestamps, witness statements. Make it bulletproof. The call ended. Darius sat in the darkness, his father's research files glowing on his laptop screen. All of this, the lawsuits, the attacks, the public battle, was about these equations and molecular diagrams. About a treatment that could save lives if it ever saw the light of day. He opened his father's video file, the one Sterling had shown him weeks ago. Watched Dr. James Cole's face as he talked about his son's potential, his belief that Darius would achieve extraordinary things. I'm trying, Dad, Darius whispered to the screen. I'm trying so hard, but they keep fighting back. His father's recorded voice answered, frozen in time, but still certain. He's going to be extraordinary. Better than me. Smarter, more creative, more determined. More determined. That was the key. North Star had money and lawyers and no moral compass. But Darius had something they couldn't buy. The absolute certainty that he was right. The evidence was real. The chemistry was sound. His father had been murdered, and the truth would not stay buried forever. He just had to outlast them. The next morning brought unexpected news. Judge Patricia Morrison, assigned to their case, denied North Star's motion to dismiss. In a scathing written opinion, she noted that the evidence of corporate involvement was substantial enough to warrant a full trial, and that dismissing the case would create the appearance of protecting powerful interests over justice. Trial is set for February 15th, Catherine announced, reading the decision with barely suppressed triumph. 8 weeks. We have 8 weeks to prepare. Can we be ready? Grace asked. We don't have a choice. Sterling was already reorganizing schedules, coordinating with experts. This is what we've been fighting for. Now we finish it. The next 8 weeks would determine everything. The trial would expose every piece of evidence, every witness, every dark corner of North Star's conspiracy. Darius would testify. His mother would testify. The truth would finally have its day in court. But as Darius looked at the calendar, counting down the days until trial, he couldn't shake the feeling that North Star had one more attack planned, something bigger than leaks or legal motions, something designed to destroy their case completely before a jury ever heard it. He was right to be worried. 3 weeks before trial, Emma burst into the guest house at dawn, her face white with shock. Someone just released a video, she said, shoving her tablet at Darius. It's your father, from the night he died. And Darius, it looks like suicide. The screen showed Dr. James Cole in his laboratory, alone, talking to a camera. But this wasn't the confident researcher from the earlier videos. This was a man who looked broken, exhausted, defeated. I can't do this anymore, his father's voice said on the recording. The research isn't working. The treatment is unstable. I've been lying to everyone, to Sterling, to my funders, to myself. I thought I could fix it, but I can't. And rather than admit failure, rather than face the consequences, I'm ending it. By the time anyone sees this, I'll be gone. I'm sorry. The video ended. Darius stared at the screen, his world tilting sideways. "It's fake," he said. "It has to be fake. Dad would never—" "North Star's claiming it's real," Emma said. "They're saying someone anonymously sent it to them, that it proves your father's death was suicide and his research was fraudulent. They're filing it as evidence to dismiss the entire case." Darius felt something crack inside him. This was it, the final attack, the one designed to destroy everything. His father's face on that screen, confessing to lies and suicide. If a jury believed it, the case was over. Huang would walk free. North Star would keep the stolen research. And Dr. James Cole's legacy would be rewritten as the delusion of a failed scientist who couldn't face his own inadequacy. "We prove it's fake," Darius said, his voice shaking with fury. "We find the deepfake artist, the AI used to generate it, the metadata proving it's fabricated. This is their last desperate move. We tear it apart." "How?" Grace had appeared in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "That's your father's voice, his face. How do we prove it's not real?" Darius looked at his mother, saw her faith crumbling, and felt the answer crystallize with perfect clarity. "Because I know chemistry," he said, "and whoever made that video made one mistake, one tiny chemical detail that proves they never actually knew Dad at all." Darius rewound the video to the 32-second mark, where his father's hand reached for a beaker in the background. He paused the frame, zoomed in until the liquid inside became visible. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the screen. Sterling, Catherine, Emma, and Grace crowded around him. "See that beaker? It's labeled as acetone, clear liquid, consistent with the label." "So?" Emma asked. "So my father never used acetone in his gene therapy research, ever. It's a common solvent, but it degrades the lipid nanoparticles he was working with. He always used ethanol or DMSO for his extractions." Darius pulled up his father's actual lab notebooks, flipped to the protocols section. "Look, every single procedure specifies ethanol. He had a whole system, color-coded labels, specific storage temperatures. Acetone wasn't even allowed in his section of the lab." Catherine leaned closer. "You're saying whoever staged this video didn't know your father's actual lab practices?" "Exactly. They created a generic chemistry lab setup, put the right labels on things, made it look authentic to someone who doesn't know better. But anyone who actually worked with my father would know this is wrong." Darius's hands trembled with a mixture of rage and vindication. "This isn't just fake. It's provably fake." Sterling pulled out his phone. "I'm calling our forensics team. We need a full analysis, metadata, video artifacts, audio patterns, everything." "And I'm calling Dr. Rodriguez from MIT," Grace said, her voice steadying. "She evaluated Darius's knowledge. She can confirm that James never used acetone in his protocols." The next 72 hours were a race against time. Sterling hired the best digital forensics experts money could buy, former FBI analysts who specialized in detecting deepfakes and manipulated media. They dissected the suicide video frame by frame, running algorithms to detect AI-generated content, analyzing audio patterns for synthesis markers. Meanwhile, Darius worked with Dr. Rodriguez to document his father's lab practices. They pulled every paper Dr. Cole had published, every protocol he'd filed, every safety review from Sterling Biotech. The pattern was absolute. In 15 years of research, Dr. James Cole had never once used acetone in gene therapy work. "This is your smoking gun," Dr. Rodriguez said during a video call. "The acetone proves whoever made this video didn't have access to James's actual methods. They were working from general chemistry knowledge, not specific expertise." "Can you testify to that?" Darius asked. "I'll testify to the earth being round if it helps put these criminals away," she said fiercely. "James Cole was a brilliant researcher. Watching his reputation get destroyed by corporate lies makes me sick. I'll do whatever you need." On the third day, the forensics team delivered their report. Catherine read it aloud in Sterling's office, her voice tight with controlled fury. The video exhibits multiple markers of AI synthesis. Audio analysis shows vocal patterns inconsistent with natural speech. Micropauses that match text-to-speech generation. Visual analysis reveals edge artifacts around the subject's face consistent with deepfake overlay. Metadata indicates the file was created 6 days ago, not 3 years ago as claimed. Conclusion. The video is a fabrication created using advanced AI tools and existing footage of Dr. Cole. They used real video of my father, Grace said quietly. Took his face, his voice, and made him say things he never said. And they got sloppy, Sterling added. The acetone mistake proves they didn't actually know James. They built a fake from surface research and it shows. So we expose it, Darius said. We hold another press conference, present the forensic evidence, destroy their credibility completely. No. Catherine's expression was calculating. We do something better. We let them submit it as evidence. Everyone turned to stare at her. Hear me out, she continued. If we expose the fake now, North Star withdraws it and claims they were victims too. Someone sent them fraudulent evidence. They had no idea. But if they formally submit it to the court, if they swear under oath that it's authentic, and then we destroy it in front of a jury, that's not just proof of a fake, that's proof of perjury. That's criminal fraud. Sterling smiled slowly. You want to let them hang themselves? I want to give them enough rope and watch them tie the noose, Catherine confirmed. The trial starts in 3 weeks. Let North Star build their entire defense around this suicide narrative. Let them commit to it publicly. Then we bring out our forensics experts, our chemistry testimony, and we don't just win the case. We destroy them so completely, they never recover. That's risky, Grace said. What if the jury believes the video before we can debunk it? They won't. Not after we're done presenting our case. Catherine pulled up her trial strategy on her laptop. We lead with the strong evidence, Huang's original confession, the financial records, the patent theft documentation. We build an unshakable foundation. Then, when North Star presents their suicide video as the centerpiece of their defense, we systematically dismantle it. The contrast will be devastating. Darius thought about it, weighing the risk against the potential payoff, letting North Star commit to a lie they couldn't take back, forcing them to defend the indefensible in front of cameras and a jury. Do it, he said. Let them think they've won. Then we show everyone exactly what they are. The next 2 weeks passed in intensive preparation. Catherine drilled every witness, refined every argument, anticipated every attack North Star might launch. Darius reviewed his testimony until he could recite his father's research in his sleep. Grace worked with a victim's advocate to prepare for the emotional testimony about losing her husband and watching her family disintegrate. The forensics experts were prepped but kept in reserve, secret weapons waiting to be deployed at exactly the right moment. Dr. Rodriguez and the other chemistry experts coordinated their testimony to create an unassailable wall of scientific authority. Sterling coordinated with friendly journalists, ensuring maximum media coverage. This trial would be broadcast nationally. Every word, every piece of evidence, every moment of drama would play out in public view. 3 days before trial, North Star filed their amended defense. As Catherine predicted, the suicide video was their centerpiece. They claimed Dr. Cole had fabricated his research results, that the treatment was dangerously unstable, and that he'd taken his own life rather than face exposure as a fraud. Victor Huang's confession, they argued, was the desperate lie of a man trying to protect his mentor's reputation. They really committed to it, Emma said, reading the filing. Their entire strategy rests on that video being real. Good, Catherine said. Let them build their house on sand. We'll bring the flood. Trial day arrived cold and clear. The courthouse steps were packed with protesters, some supporting justice for Dr. Cole, others waving signs claiming North Star was being unfairly persecuted by activist lawyers. Media vans lined the streets. Security was tight enough to feel oppressive. Darius wore the suit Sterling had bought him, charcoal gray, professional, the kind of clothes his father used to wear to conferences. Grace walked beside him, holding his hand like she had when he was small. Sterling and Catherine flanked them like generals leading troops into battle. Inside, the courtroom was austere and imposing. Dark wood, high ceilings, the seal of Massachusetts justice mounted above the judge's bench. Darius took his seat at the plaintiff's table, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. 3 years of grief and survival, 8 months of homelessness, weeks of attacks and intimidation, all building to this. Across the aisle, North Star's legal team looked like an army. 8 lawyers in expensive suits, assistants with tablets and files, Dr. Vance sitting behind them with the cool confidence of someone who believed they'd already won. Judge Morrison entered. Everyone rose. The jury filed in, 12 ordinary people who would decide if justice meant anything against corporate power. The court calls the case of Cole versus North Star Pharmaceuticals, the judge announced. Counselors, are you ready to proceed? Ready, Your Honor, Catherine said. Ready, confirmed North Star's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Robert Ashford, who'd built a career defending pharmaceutical companies. Miss Moore, you may present your opening statement. Catherine stood, moved to face the jury, and began to speak. Her voice was calm, measured, devastating in its clarity. 3 years ago, Dr. James Cole was murdered in his laboratory. The people who killed him made one critical mistake. They underestimated his son. Darius Cole was 12 years old when he started learning chemistry from his father, 17 when he found himself homeless after his father's death destroyed his family. But he never stopped learning, never stopped thinking, never stopped believing that the truth mattered. And 3 months ago, he cracked the encrypted files that prove his father was murdered for a treatment that could have saved millions of lives. She walked the jury through the evidence methodically. Huang's confession, the financial records showing payments from North Star shell companies, the patent filings that matched Dr. Cole's research down to molecular formulas, the cover-up of the original accident investigation. The defense will tell you this is about one rogue employee who acted alone, Catherine said, but the evidence shows a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of North Star's executive team. They stole. They lied. And when Dr. Cole discovered the theft, they killed him to keep their secret safe. We're not asking you to take our word for it. We're asking you to look at the chemistry, follow the money, and decide if justice means anything when billion-dollar corporations are the defendants. She sat down. Darius felt the jury's eyes on him, evaluating, judging, wondering if this teenage kid could really be telling the truth against such powerful opposition. Ashford stood for North Star's opening. He was smooth, practiced, the kind of lawyer who could make lies sound like reason. This is a tragedy, he began. Dr. James Cole was a brilliant researcher who made significant contributions to gene therapy. But brilliance doesn't equal infallibility. The evidence will show that Dr. Cole's treatment had serious stability problems he couldn't solve. Rather than admit failure, he became depressed, paranoid, convinced that his colleagues were sabotaging him, and in a moment of despair he took his own life. Ashford played the suicide video on the courtroom monitors. Darius watched the jury's faces as his father's deep-faked image confessed to fraud and failure. Several jurors looked shaken. One woman wiped her eyes. Victor Huang is a desperate man trying to rewrite history, Ashford continued. His confession is filled with inconsistencies and impossibilities. The plaintiff's case rests on the testimony of a traumatized teenager with documented mental health issues and a homeless background that raises serious questions about his stability and motives. We sympathize with Darius Cole's loss. But sympathy cannot replace evidence, and the evidence shows that this lawsuit is built on grief, not facts. He sat down, looking confident. The jury looked confused, caught between two competing narratives. Judge Morrison called for the plaintiff's first witness. The plaintiff calls Dr. Helen Rodriguez. Dr. Rodriguez took the stand with the authority of someone who'd testified in dozens of trials. Catherine walked her through her credentials, PhD from Caltech, 20 years at Harvard, numerous publications in gene therapy journals. Dr. Rodriguez, you evaluated Darius Cole's understanding of his father's research. What was your conclusion? Mr. Cole possesses graduate-level knowledge of gene therapy chemistry. His understanding of lipid nanoparticle design, cellular targeting mechanisms, and pharmaceutical development is exceptional for someone his age. He clearly received extensive training from an expert researcher. Could he have fabricated this knowledge? No. The depth of understanding he demonstrated requires years of study and direct mentorship. You can't fake that kind of expertise by reading papers. He knows this material from the inside out. Ashford's cross-examination was aggressive. He tried to suggest Dr. Rodriguez was biased, friendly to Sterling Biotech, financially motivated to support the plaintiff. Dr. Rodriguez, isn't it true that Sterling Biotech has funded your research? Sterling funds hundreds of researchers. So does North Star, including you as a paid expert witness. Funding doesn't equal bias, it equals how science gets done. But you have a professional relationship with Graham Sterling. I have a professional relationship with honest research. James Cole's work was honest. North Star's theft was not. That's what the chemistry shows, regardless of who signs my grant checks. The jury seemed to appreciate her bluntness. Ashford backed off, looking less confident than when he'd started. The trial continued for 3 days with witness after witness. Detective Santos testified about Huang's confession and the investigation into the cover-up. The forensic accountant walked through the money trail connecting Huang to North Star executives. Former North Star researchers testified that they'd personally seen Dr. Vance incorporating stolen data into company research. Each testimony built on the last, creating a foundation of evidence that felt unshakable. Darius watched the jury's expression shift from uncertainty to engagement. They were listening, starting to believe. On the 4th day, Grace took the stand. Catherine guided her through the story of James's death, the aftermath, the destruction of their family. "My husband was murdered," Grace said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. "And I spent 3 years believing it was an accident, blaming myself for not seeing the signs. But there were no signs." James was excited about his research. He talked about the lives it would save. He would never have killed himself, and he would never have fabricated data. "The man I married believed in truth above everything." Ashford's cross-examination was brutal. He brought up her hospitalization, her medication, her supervised treatment for severe depression. "Mrs. Cole, isn't it possible your grief has colored your memories? That you've constructed a narrative that makes your husband's death easier to accept?" "My grief is real," Grace said quietly. "But so is the evidence. You can question my mental health all you want. It doesn't change the chemistry, it doesn't change the financial records, and it doesn't change the fact that my husband was murdered by people who valued profit over human life." The courtroom was silent. Several jurors were visibly emotional. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Catherine called Darius to the stand. He walked to the witness box, feeling like he was stepping into battle. Ashford was watching him like a predator measuring prey. The jury looked curious, skeptical, waiting to see if this teenager could possibly be credible. Catherine started with easy questions. His background, his relationship with his father, his education in chemistry. "Tell the jury about the night you found your father's encrypted files." Darius described breaking into the lab, finding the notebooks, cracking the password using his father's own logic. He explained the chemistry in terms the jury could understand, showing how his father's treatment worked and why it was revolutionary. "And when you saw North Star's patent filing, what did you notice?" "Everything was identical, the molecular structure, the targeting mechanism, the compound ratios. It wasn't similar research. It was the exact same research, filed under their name 18 months after my father developed it." Catherine showed the jury side-by-side comparisons. The similarities were impossible to deny. Then came Ashford's cross-examination. He started gentle, almost sympathetic. "Darius, you've been through a terrible ordeal. Losing your father, becoming homeless, struggling with your mental health. That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was. And during that time, you were angry. Angry at the world, angry at the people you believed had failed your father. I was angry at the people who killed him, yes. But you had no proof of murder, just suspicions, grief-fueled conspiracy theories. I had my father's video confession about the theft. I had Huang's admission. I had the chemistry proving the patents were stolen. Chemistry you claim to understand despite being 17 with no formal credentials. Chemistry I learned from my father. Chemistry 3 PhD researchers confirmed I understand at a graduate level." Ashford pulled up the suicide video. "Let's talk about this. Your father, in his own words, confessing that his research was flawed and he couldn't face the consequences. How do you explain that?" This was it. The trap springing shut. Darius felt the entire courtroom holding its breath. "That's not my father," he said clearly. "Excuse me? That video is fake. An AI-generated deepfake created using existing footage of my father and synthesized speech patterns. It's not real." Ashford looked triumphant, like Darius had walked into exactly the defense he'd prepared. "That's a serious accusation." Do you have any proof this video is fabricated? Yes. Darius looked directly at the jury. Whoever made that video didn't know my father's actual lab practices. At the 32-second mark, there's a beaker labeled acetone in the background. My father never used acetone in his gene therapy research, ever. It degrades the lipid nanoparticles he worked with. He always used ethanol or DMSO. It's documented in every protocol he ever filed, every paper he published. He pulled up his father's actual lab notebooks on the courtroom monitors, showed the jury the protocols, the chemical specifications, the absolute consistency across 15 years of research. The person who made that fake video set up a generic chemistry lab and put the right labels on things to make it look authentic. But they didn't have access to my father's real methods. And that one mistake, that one chemical detail, proves the entire video is a lie. The courtroom erupted. Ashford was objecting. Judge Morrison was calling for order. And Catherine was smiling like she'd just won the lottery. "Your Honor," she said once the noise died down, "the plaintiff would like to call a rebuttal witness. Dr. Michael Zhang, digital forensics expert, formerly with the FBI's Cyber Division." Dr. Zhang took the stand and systematically destroyed the suicide video. He showed the AI synthesis markers, the audio artifacts, the metadata proving recent creation. He demonstrated how deepfakes were made, showing the jury examples that looked just as real as North Star's evidence. "This video was created using advanced AI tools within the last 2 weeks," he concluded. "It is not authentic footage of Dr. Cole. It is a fabrication designed to deceive." Ashford tried to recover, suggesting the forensics were inconclusive, that the acetone detail was a continuity error, not proof of fabrication. But the damage was done. The jury had seen the evidence, heard the explanation, and understood they'd been lied to. Catherine called Dr. Rodriguez back to confirm that Dr. Cole's acetone-free protocols were absolute and well-documented. Then she rested the plaintiff's case. North Star tried to salvage their defense, calling their own experts to dispute the forensics, to claim the suicide video was authentic despite the evidence against it. But every witness Catherine cross-examined fell apart under questioning. The chemistry experts couldn't explain the acetone. The digital analysts admitted they hadn't actually examined the video for AI markers. Dr. Vance claimed ignorance of the stolen research, despite emails with her name all over the integration process. On the 8th day, closing arguments arrived. Ashford went first, trying to rebuild his shattered case. "The plaintiff wants you to believe in an elaborate conspiracy, but sometimes the simplest explanation is true. Dr. Cole struggled. He failed. And rather than accept it, his family has constructed a fantasy to avoid facing reality." He sat down looking defeated. Catherine stood for her closing. She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. "The defense showed you a fake suicide video and swore it was real. They showed you stolen research and claimed it was independent. They showed you financial records proving conspiracy and called it coincidence. At every turn, when faced with facts they couldn't dispute, they chose to lie." Victor Huang confessed to murder. The chemistry proves patent theft. The digital forensics prove fabricated evidence. And through it all, one person has told you the truth. A 17-year-old who loved his father enough to fight the most powerful pharmaceutical company in America to make sure justice was served. Darius Cole didn't ask for this fight, but he never backed down. And now it's up to you to finish what he started. Hold North Star accountable, find for the plaintiff, and send a message that no corporation is above the law. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Darius spent that time in a courthouse waiting room with his mother, Sterling, Catherine, and Emma, unable to eat, unable to think about anything except those 12 people deciding his father's legacy. When the bailiff called them back, Darius's hands were shaking so badly Grace had to steady him. The jury filed in. Their faces were unreadable. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Morrison asked. The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor." "In the matter of Cole versus North Star Pharmaceuticals on the count of wrongful death, how do you find?" "We find for the plaintiff." The courtroom exploded. Darius couldn't breathe. Grace was crying. Sterling was shaking his hand. Catherine was already planning the press conference. "On the count of patent infringement and theft of intellectual property, how do you find?" "We find for the plaintiff." "On the count of conspiracy to suppress medical research." How do you find? We find for the plaintiff. Every count, every charge. Total victory. Judge Morrison read the jury's damages award. $50 million in compensatory damages, $200 million in punitive damages, and an injunction ordering Northstar to immediately cease production of their stolen treatment and return all patents to the Cole family estate. It was over. They'd won. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed. Darius stood at the microphone with his mother beside him and finally said the words he'd waited 3 years to speak. My father was murdered for trying to save lives. Today, a jury confirmed that truth. Northstar Pharmaceuticals will pay for what they did, and more importantly, my father's treatment will be completed and made available to every patient who needs it. That's what he would have wanted. That's what we fought for, and that's what we won. The questions came fast, but Darius didn't answer them. He'd said everything that mattered. The aftermath moved quickly. Northstar's stock collapsed. Dr. Vance was fired and faced criminal charges for perjury and fraud. Victor Huang pled guilty to murder and conspiracy in exchange for testifying against the Northstar executives who'd hired him. The charges against his wife were dropped. Sterling established the James Cole Foundation, dedicated to completing the gene therapy research and making it available at cost to patients worldwide. Darius was named as a research fellow, with full funding for his MIT education and a guaranteed position leading his father's project after graduation. Grace completed her treatment and moved into a small house near campus, finally stable and healing. She started teaching high school chemistry, telling her students about her husband's work and the son who'd fought to honor it. Emma took over media relations for the foundation, turning the case into a documentary that won awards and sparked national conversation about pharmaceutical ethics. And Darius started at MIT in the fall, walking into his first chemistry class with his father's notebooks in his backpack and a future that felt possible again. 5 years later, the treatment was complete. Dr. Darius Cole, now 22 with a master's degree and 3 published papers, stood in a hospital room watching a patient receive the first dose of his father's gene therapy. The woman had degenerative Parkinson's, the same condition that would have destroyed Emma Sterling's life if not for Dr. James Cole's earlier work. 6 months later, she walked out of that hospital without assistance. The treatment had worked. More patients followed. Hundreds, then thousands. The therapy that Northstar had tried to bury became the standard of care for degenerative diseases. Lives were saved. Families stayed whole. And every dose carried Dr. James Cole's name as the researcher who'd made it possible. Darius was working late in the Foundation's lab one night when he noticed something odd. A research assistant's coffee cup sitting too close to volatile compounds. A minor safety violation, easily corrected. But as he moved the cup to a safer location, he caught a faint scent beneath the coffee's aroma. Bitter almonds. His blood went cold. He'd smelled this before, 3 years ago in a restaurant when he'd stopped Graham Sterling from drinking poisoned wine. The same chemical signature. The same subtle sweetness beneath everyday odors. Cyanide. Darius ran a quick test on the coffee. The results confirmed it. Someone had poisoned the assistant's drink. Not enough to kill immediately, but enough to cause serious harm over time. He checked the security footage, saw a visiting researcher from a rival pharmaceutical company near the coffee station, watched him add something to the cup when no one was looking. Darius didn't hesitate. He called Sterling, called Detective Santos, called campus security. The rival researcher was arrested within the hour, his car searched, evidence of a broader sabotage plot uncovered. He'd been hired to slow down the Foundation's research, to create accidents and delays that would benefit his employer's competing treatment. But this time, the threat was caught early. The evidence was documented. And the people trying to bury life-saving research faced consequences immediately instead of 3 years too late. As Darius watched police escort the saboteur away, he thought about his father's video. The certainty in Dr. Cole's voice when he'd said his son would be extraordinary. He'd been right. Not because Darius was smarter or more talented than anyone else, but because he'd learned the most important lesson chemistry could teach. Pay attention to the details. Question what doesn't fit. And never, ever assume that the answer you want to see is the truth you need to know. His father had taught him to read the world's secret language, and Darius had used that knowledge to make sure no other brilliant life got erased in silence. No other family was destroyed by greed. No other truth stayed buried because the people who benefited from lies had more money than the people fighting for justice. The Foundation's work continued. The patients kept coming. And somewhere, Darius hoped, his father was watching and finally at peace, knowing that his legacy wasn't just the treatment he'd created, but the son who'd made sure it reached the people who needed it most. The story that began with a homeless teenager screaming about poison in a restaurant ended with that same kid, now a researcher, now a scientist, now someone who made sure the next generation didn't have to fight as hard for truth, standing in a lab his father would have loved, finishing the work that death had interrupted but could never truly stop. Because some things are worth fighting for. Family, justice, the belief that brilliance should save lives instead of getting murdered for threatening profit margins. Darius Cole learned that from his father, and he'd spend the rest of his life making sure no one forgot it.